before I talk to you about Laois at the weekend, I did want to get your take on what Dermot Ling was just saying there about the importance for Wexford to come through. Obviously, they came through against your own county, but I don't think anybody begrudged Wexford a victory at the weekend. It's been a long time coming, and it's an amazing story.
Yeah, it is. I think, look, aside from the fact that, they topped my own county, you'd have to say the scenes down what I've seen on online and on television over the last 24 hours is just phenomenal. Like, you just go, that's what it's all about. And Gizzy touched on it there, but the joy and the happiness it brings to people. And you just see that outpouring of happiness from Wexford people. And it's brilliant. It's what it's all about. It's to the core of it. And most importantly, I think what it is that there's, Gizzy mentioned it there, but the young lad of being 7 or 8 or 14, they're looking at that. They're looking at their heroes up on a bus and they're saying, look, that's where we want to be, and that sows the seed for the next generation. Yeah, and
Leinster kind of needs everybody to be good over the next while to make that competition as fierce as the competition in Munster is.
It does, yeah. Look, it's something that was probably needed. I think, I would have spoke with John Conran there going back a while ago about the Davy Fitz appointment, and he said it was something kind of left field, something that Wexford needed, something completely different than maybe what they had done up to that point. He probably brought a level of organisation and maybe an entourage with him that the attention to detail was covered in so many ways, and it would have been just, I suppose, a new level. And for players, I suppose, if you see that there's a really, really professional setup, then, and you see that this is going somewhere, it probably means you will give yourself a hell of a lot more to it. And that's not any disrespect to a setup. Like, I think if they see someone that's really, really organised and really, really knows where he's going and has a plan of what he wants to do, and, you just buy into it. And the bigger benefit really is that Leinster is getting stronger.
Yeah, and part of Leinster getting stronger is what's going on with Laois. It was obviously Laois and Westmeath that played at the weekend, and you put up a huge score. So you got a little bit of a sense of what the Laois hurling community was like. Not quite the same scenes as in Wexford, but I imagine there was quite a bit of a welcome back when you guys actually brought a bit of silverware home.
Yeah, I suppose we didn't have the roads blocked anywhere with fans out on the road, but at the same time, when we landed into the Midlands Park Hotel, there was a very good reception there. A lot of I suppose it was a bit more intimate really, because it was family and friends of the team, and that made it very special for them as well when they turned the corner, to see a gang of people waiting for them. So that was brilliant for them to mingle with their family there for the guts of a couple of hours and go enjoy the night. And yeah, look, it's again, we're probably a good bit back the road from where Wexford are right now, but at the same time, you're getting closer to it. You're getting closer to the teams in Leinster, and I suppose it doesn't get any closer than facing off to them all next year. So that's the reward. That's the challenge that's in front of us, and you'd have to say, we definitely have the ingredients, and we have some good players that are going to be there, but we definitely have a lot of work to do to get up to that standard. The physicality of that Leinster final and the intensity of it was savage.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing, like, you can look back at a time in recent memory when Wexford didn't have that physicality and that hurling and the tactical nous to take on Kilkenny, when you would have been part of Kilkenny teams that actually were ripping Wexford apart, and those games weren't contests at all. So you can point to recent memory and say that's where Wexford have gone from this point to this point, and actually say to people credibly in Laois, if we keep going and if everybody in the county gets behind this team, then who knows what could happen in the next 5 years.
I'll quickly remind you, Ger, when you ran into Skippy Root and Declan Ryan and lads like that, they were fairly physical, and I'll tell you, we knew about it when you the trick was to avoid going into contact with those guys. They weren't simple, so look, I mean, it was always about using your brain rather than your brawn. But yeah, look, your point is right on the meat there, Ger. In fairness, I think that has to be the challenge, that you look at them and say, look, where have they gone from 3 years ago to Kilkenny beating them by 20 points in Nolan Park, and to turn around and straight from year one they were competitive. And look, you can I suppose much has been made of Davy's system, and so much so that every time he talks about it, he feels the need to defend it. I think at this stage, look, we know what it is. It's a hurling system, but at the end of the day, they execute the basics very, very well too. Their touch, their ability to get heads up and find a man in a better position is really, really good. Physically, I don't think I've ever seen a Wexford team as conditioned and as fit I think that's the one thing, that's the foundation of any Davy setup, is that his teams will be fit. But yeah, that's, in a way, it's maybe something that you'll hold up on a ledge for the boys to say to the Laois of this world, say, look lads, you can if you buy into it, but you definitely say, you're probably, the strength of your squad is something that you really have to flesh out over the next year or two if you're going to be competitive.
Eddie, you're right when you say that the talk of Davy and a system has been overplayed at this point, that it is sort of archaic to question why anybody would even work a system in elite performance sport. Like, I'm sure your Laois team operates under a system.
Yeah, it's pretty orthodox, Owen. So look, it's working for us, and look, it's based on, I suppose, being flexible. I think you have to adapt to whatever is happening. And earlier this year, we played Waterford in the league, and by the very movements that Waterford made, they gave us an extra man at the back. So we had to try and think of how best to utilise that, as regards trying to hurt the opposition, or what we could do with that. So I think it's all about being adaptable. If it means that your midfielders have to push into the half-back line just a bit to help out, then so be it, and maybe create the space up the field. But yeah, look, I suppose the one big thing I targeted with our guys was our ability to score, and I think we've done that. We have great options up front, and look, I suppose the reality is we have a huge test ahead of us on Sunday, and that's going to really test where we are. It's exactly that. It's a benchmark of where we are.
How do you manage that 1 week gap? Was it a couple of pints on Sunday night, recovery session last night, or how do you work it?
Yeah, it was a recovery session of sorts, I suppose. Yeah, look, I think that was the one thing that we touched on Sunday night before we indulged ourselves a little bit, was that we had to kind of come out the weekend and do ourselves justice. And yeah, it was a big ask. Yeah, it was going to be a test of lads' maturity and everything else. But we're training tonight, and look, we have to get back to the pitch. We have to probably do a little bit of a flush this evening anyway, and try get the dirty deeds out of the system, because we have a huge challenge ahead of us on Sunday, and it's one that you'd like to have a real go at. Dublin are a serious outfit. I think they finally they delivered this year and got through to the knockout stages of the championship. So we'll be under no illusions. They're sitting there for the last 2 or 3 weeks getting freshened up, and we're going to need to be at our maximum, and it's going to be very difficult. It's a very short turnaround, but it is what it is.
Eddie, when you took the job, I mean, obviously this would have been the target, so fulfilling the target is always a great thing. It's a real sense of fulfillment when you set out on a course of action. You do the thing you're supposed to do. But when you did take the job, did you think this was possible? Did you know this team were as good as you've turned them into?
Yeah, look, I suppose the realism when I said your target has to be to win the championship that you're in. It was only as we went along that we discovered that, you say, right, there's definitely potential here. I felt the hurling, from what I seen very early, I thought the hurling ability was there, and I would have known of a few of the more better high profile players that would have played Fitzgibbon Cup, that would have played with UCDs and Carlo. So you knew there was hurling there. It was just a case to get the other stuff right, and that was the level of work rate and the level of skill, I suppose, their skill level, and how to work and how to tackle. Because for me, look, and from what I learned as a player, was if the work rate is right, then the hurling takes over after that. So yeah, look, it was difficult. I suppose it wasn't, I suppose, a mad statement to say we were capable of winning the McDonagh. You looked at the competition that was there and said, look, all those teams are quite balanced, but yeah, we have a very good chance of beating them. And I think once the big one was obviously Offaly, and that was the one we targeted. We targeted nothing else, only that match. And it's make or break, that kind of a match, because if you lose, you're now in a different mentality facing into a team 7 days later. So that was a massive match to set us off for the year.
From your own perspective, obviously this totally justifies your decision to get involved. Was it always a thing that you wanted to do, to get involved in management, and why did you end up getting the Laois job? How did that come about?
It's quite funny, the story. It was only literally mentioned in passing by a guy I knew when I lived up there. And he just kind of mentioned to me, he said, look, there's lads on the hunt for the Laois management, would you be interested? And I said, yeah, sure. Look, I kind of, casually said, yeah, I would. And then I got a phone call off one of the committee guys, and it was then that you kind of go, okay, will you give me a couple of days to think about it? And There was obviously one or two other guys in the mix as well, so you kind of had to sit down at home and see what the situation was there and say, look, can we manage it? And it appealed to me, I suppose, in a way is that I lived up there for a good few years, so I had a bit of a knowledge of the ins and outs of it, and what was entailed, and I knew there was definitely hurling ability up there. I thought Cheddar Plunkett done a really good job with them a couple of years ago and had them really, really competitive, so you felt that, look, there's definitely talent there, and I suppose for myself as well, it was a case of saying, right, can I do something with these lads? Can I turn it around? They're in a really difficult, tough position at the moment, and maybe we can do something to get them going.
At what point in your hurling career did you start thinking about the game in a way that might be conducive to being a good coach? Because obviously the punditry and the coaching aren't too dissimilar in terms of how you think about a game. Was it late in your career? Was it early on that you were like, right, I get this and I could potentially be good at it?
I suppose it was, I gave a year with a junior club in Kilkenny there back in 2013. Liz Downey there, and we won the junior club, and myself and I was coaching, and Martin Power was managing, a former Waterford footballer, and I suppose I just dipped the toes really at that point in time, and I had ideas of what I wanted to do, and how I'd like a team to set up, and I suppose myself, I would have generally, as a player, maybe I had to use my brain a little bit more when I was playing. So in that regard, you were kind of going, okay, can I transfer that now to, we'll say, a team? Can you get them to think smart? And that to me would have been one of my philosophies, I suppose, as regards hurling. Look, there was what you learn from being exposed to a system under Brian Cody and his, I suppose, ideas. But then it was to obviously marry him off with your own philosophy. And me always would have been about playing smart and doing the simple things well, and always give the ball to the man in the right position. And so I suppose at that time you kind of went, yeah, okay, it worked this year. The boys bought into it. And I suppose, look, based on even my background down in the Garda College too, you're doing a bit of instructing, so you're conscious of how guys learn and say, look, can you transfer that? And I suppose, use that to say you help guys learn and help guys be as good as they can be on the hurling pitch.
That's interesting. So what you're saying there, the idea that a certain type of player makes a good coach actually isn't that untrue, because you had to think a little bit more on the pitch. That type of player helped you become the coach that you are now, and the coach that hopefully you'll continue to be over the next few years.
Yeah, hopefully. I think it's an essential. I think for any player, I think if I suppose any player that maybe don't think about it enough, but I would have thought about it a hell of a lot. James McGarry, said to us in 2007 about playing matches over in your head in the run up to them, that's how you kind of psychologically prepare yourself, and the very technical term is a visualization, and we see that with a lot of top sports people. So for me, in the build up to matches, you just thought through the scenarios you were going to encounter, so you kind of pictured them in your head and how you're going to deal with them. And for me that was very important, because I could spend 20 minutes inside in the corner, and I was that type of player. If the ball wasn't coming into me, I got very anxious, and as a result then you get you get heavy touches and stuff. So it was just being at ease with that. But definitely from the perspective of playing smart, it's something that I think all players have to do now. If your game face or your critical thinking isn't on during a match, when the pressure is high and you're not doing that in training week in, week out, it's very, very difficult to go to somewhere like Croke Park or the big stadiums and perform.
I don't know if you've had a chance to check out the Examiner today yet, but Derek McGrath has a piece where he's very highly complimentary of you as a manager. Very much in evidence was the evolution of Eddie Brennan as a manager at the weekend. He now realises that teams can be tactically fluid without being hamstrung by over-instruction, the perfect mix that we all strive for. And he's got loads of stuff about Mark Kavanagh as well. High praise from Derek McGrath, who obviously is a very deep thinker of the game. Is he right about like you want your team to play with tactical instruction, but also to be quite free when an opportunity arises? So there's a balance to be struck between playing in a system and being locked into that system.
Definitely, yeah. I think look, at the end of the day, it's when the players get on the pitch, I think they have to be able to think, and they have to be able to make decisions on the pitch. And part of our instruction, look, I suppose we kept things very, very basic during the year, and central to that too. Look, I had Niall Corcoran there with me, from former Dublin player, who was our head coach, and he was really, really good. I think the players bought into his messages as well, and Tommy Fitz and Fran as well. But I think we when we spoke initially and I met with Niall, we were on the same wavelength, and one of the key things I felt, and at times I would have felt, if I'm being self-critical here, I would have felt I could be over giving guys maybe a little bit too much information. So that was something we zoned in on, saying we give lads very, very basic instructions, simple instructions, and give them the freedom to say, look lads, it might take us 5 or 6 minutes to adjust to a tactical move from the other team, but that's where we want you to box it off yourselves on the pitch. If you see that they've a man drop back, communicate that around, or we now go up the wings, or you have to say, well, there's no point in making a hero of that man. And that's just one example of it. You're saying, look, if we find our backs are being pulled apart a little bit, well, our midfielders might have to drop another 5 or 10 yards just to help out with that, and our wing forwards then have space in front of them. So like you said there, it's nice to hear that, but I suppose it's a very, very simplified version, and I think you give players a very, very basic grasp of what you need them to do, and if they focus on the core stuff, you're not overcomplicating it. And I think you have to realise that the players are the ones on the pitch doing the executing. They're the ones that, when it crosses the lines, they're the ones that are hurling. So they have to be very, very clear in what they're about, and there is a freedom to sort it out themselves on the pitch.
Eddie, best of luck with the weekend, and congratulations on the first trophy. Thanks a million.
Thanks a million, guys. All the best.
Eddie Brennan there, the Laois manager, giving us some reaction after Laois picked up their silverware and will play against Dublin Import Laois, part of the double header with the Meath-Clare game at the weekend.
It's brilliant to see. I mean, is this sort of a statement of what could possibly be, I hate to bring it back to football, but with a Tier 2 competition down the line, it's the idea that, of course, they're back in the Liam McCarthy is a huge thing for them, and maybe that's where every team wants to be, and potentially there will be a rolling out of a bigger Leinster Championship in years to come. But winning a Joe McDonagh Cup is a big deal. It's been a brilliant competition. There could be more done in terms of televising more games and more promotion of it, but I don't know, it's seeming pretty positive to me.
It's 23 minutes past 8 this morning on OTB AM. If you want to get in touch with us, you can use the hashtag OTB AM.